in the 06010. Focus, fantasy focus.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football presented by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. My name is Daniel Dopp here with Yates and Stephania Bell. Guys, it's Friday. And the next time we get to Friday, a football game will have happened.
Oh, with another one that night, too.
That's right.
And more to come on Sunday, and then the best of all coming on
It's
Monday.
like right on our doorstep, guys. How pumped are you for this?
Can't wait. By the way, I'm writing this down. We're doing pigskin pick 'em amongst the people in this show, and there's going to be repercussions. Like, we can decide whether we want to reward the winner or just punish the loser. But we need to do pigskin pick 'em. We've gotten away from that.
Yes.
I'm with you.
Couple of seasons, and I will not stand for it anymore.
No, I'm with you. Bring it back.
Bring it back.
I found an ice bath at Ocean State Job Lot that I took a picture of just so that when Mike Clay comes in last place, that's what it's going to be.
His worst fear.
I would love an ice bath.
I know.
That would be great for you right now. Yeah.
I know. It's his worst fear. So really, we have to find a way to have.
We
him
gotta
listen,
do
have
something.
To do the ice bath.
We're also in the old studio today, and I think I took for granted just how small it is now. I'm like, am I spitting on you guys when I speak?
We're very tight here.
Or that, or our new studio is just gigantic.
It is pretty big.
Doing some work on it today, so if you're wondering why, we have not been demoted, at least not to my knowledge. They told us they are working.
Matter
on
of
that.
opinion.
All right, we got a very big show today lined up. We're talking about our fantasy favorites at every single position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and kicker and defense. You guys brought your favorite kickers and defenses, right? I know Stephania brought her favorite kicker.
I'm on the record.
Ready to
My
go with
favorite
that
kicker.
one.
I have a favorite defense, but it's specific to week one because I'm telling you, so many good teams play each other early in the season.
Right.
That drafting one of those premium defenses might not be your best friend.
Might not be. All right. Well, if we have time, we will
Here's a
talk about that a
tease.
little bit more, right? Love that. All right, let's get things kicked off with the opening drive. The wait is over. Stephania, you can rejoice. Brandon Aiyuk has signed a contract.
For the record, if you would like to go back in my Twitter feed or X feed, whatever you'd like to call it, go find the one where I said a long time ago, before it was cool to say it, that I somehow, call me crazy, but I think this is all going to work out at the end of the day. Brandon Aiyuk will be with the 49ers. But we're not done. You guys are going to talk about all the news. I'm going to sit here and tell you that I still want Trent Williams in the building.
Oh, we all still want Trent Williams in the building.
This was, and Field, you've talked about this, knowing the deals of the contract, but just as a fan of the team, you just felt like this was something that both sides really wanted to get done. It just, when wide receivers started to get paid, it made it more difficult for that initial offer with the Niners and Brandon Aiyuk. It just didn't look as appealing. So it was one of those where I want to go out and shop around. I want to window shop. And then maybe it wasn't as pretty, on the outside as what we had in the building. And they sweetened the deal.
4 years, $120 million. Congratulations. He is, generationally wealthy now, and specific to Brandon Aiyuk's fantasy value, it's 2024. And we can have a conversation about 2025 and beyond, because I think one of the undercurrents of this, and this is we'll let tomorrow's problems be taken care of tomorrow, is that they're going to have to figure out some finances next year. But for 2024, Brandon Aiyuk is in the best spot for his fantasy value
100%.
amongst the realistic locations, right? This is the best case scenario. And let's talk about this if you've already drafted. If you drafted Brandon Aiyuk, you probably got him at a bit of a discount because people were scared of the uncertainty surrounding his situation. He has been hovering right around my wide receiver 20 throughout the offseason and up to this point. It hasn't moved much for Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe a spot here or there as the uncertainty continued to grow. Now, not only do you have certainty he will be back, but it's in the best spot. This is better for him than being in Cleveland or Pittsburgh or New England. Yep. If you drafted Brandon Aiyuk in a draft prior to yesterday, you ended up getting a value. Congratulations to you.
His ADP at 43.8. Where do you think that moves after all the drafts that are leading into the final week?
I could see it creeping into the back end of the 30s.
Yeah, same.
I could see that as well. I moved him up in my rankings because I did have him a little bit lower in case. I mean, when you were doing this, I wanted to be a little more risk averse. And there were so many good wide receivers this year that it made sense if a lot of people were like, you know what? This is not about Brandon Aiyuk's talent. It's about just the uncertainty of where he lands. Because like you said, if he went to any of those other three places, it would not have been near the value, I feel like, or the ceiling on his potential fantasy game.
Drake London in Pittsburgh by Arthur Smith.
It would have been tough. So very thrilled to have Brandon Aiyuk back. I just moved him back inside my top 20 as well.
I do feel compelled to say he hasn't practiced. So, we talk about these players who have not been in camp practicing, and the risk of injury does go up somewhat because they haven't been acclimated to football. So, fingers crossed, double crossed if you're like me or a 49ers fan, you don't want to see anything happen, but the injury risk bumps up a tiny bit.
Field, let me ask you this question real quick. I've got Brandon Aiyuk just ahead of Deebo Samuel. Do you have Aiyuk ahead of Deebo, or are they back-to-back? Where are they at in your rankings?
I do, but it's really close.
Real close.
Right? I mean, I know that Brandon Aiyuk feels like he has more stock right now than Deebo Samuel, but it was just 2 years ago that we were discussing Deebo Samuel as perhaps the most unique offensive player in the entire league. Deebo certainly feels primed for a big season this year.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Deebo, kind of a contract year this year.
Exactly.
A lot of motivation for Deebo to ball out and get a contract that maybe mirrors or even exceeds Brandon Aiyuk's.
Yeah, both of these wide receivers should do very well this year. Very excited that Brandon Aiyuk is under contract. All right, when we come back, we are talking about our favorite quarterbacks in fantasy for 2024. We'll see you in a minute. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp, Field Yates, and Stephania Bell. Guys, we're talking about our favorite fantasy players from each position. We're just going to start at the quarterback spot. There's a bunch of guys. Stephania, I'm going to start with you. We'll work our way down, and then we'll go backwards, all right? So we'll kind of do a snake draft while we do these, if that's all right with you.
We're going to teach our friend Brian Windhorst, for those that listen to the Hoop Collective. He doesn't quite understand the snake draft concept, so Windy, this is for you right now.
That's right,
draft.
Brian.
All right.
All right, Stephania, this is favorite quarterback doesn't necessarily mean like we could all just pick Josh Allen. Like he might be our favorite quarterback in fantasy, but you're talking about value. You're talking about where you can get someone in the draft. Who's your favorite quarterback this year in fantasy?
Big secret. Big surprise. I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson.
Okay, that's
And
fair.
I've been talking about him throughout the preseason, and I probably dropped the note that I spent a little time with him where he trains in the offseason in Jacksonville. But I wanted to see for myself how he looked coming off of this AC joint surgery, which is not that common in quarterbacks. And even when they do have it, sometimes there are difficulties in terms of the rehab, which, Field can appreciate shoulder injuries and rehab.
Yep.
So I wanted to see how he was throwing the ball. And let me tell you, the ball was not only coming out of his hands beautifully, but it was the follow through. A lot of times they're stiff. They don't come across their body. So the ability to place the ball everywhere that he needed to place it when I was watching him was fantastic. Zip on the ball, not a problem. This guy throws so hard that he, in fact, has to sometimes scale it back a little bit. But then you look at just the athlete that he is. And when you're standing next to him, you are reminded what an athlete he is and what an athlete you are not. So this is a guy who is going to run the football, throw the football, and really presents that dual threat we've talked about so much, that the running quarterback provides you with so much extra in terms of fantasy point opportunity. And with a healthy Jonathan Taylor and a threat in Anthony Richardson, I just love what he's going to be able to do, and he's got great receiving weapons as well.
The only thing I want to reiterate, because I can already see the discourse taking place, is that for our purposes, if Anthony Richardson plays great real-life football, he will be excellent in fantasy. He can also play pretty average real-life football and be excellent in fantasy. So if you come back at me and you're like, well, that pick 6 he threw, I don't care. As long as he gets 20 fantasy points in the game,
That's right.
He can have 5 turnovers. I just don't care. So I just want to make that very clear, because while I think it's fair to wonder exactly what kind of real-life quarterback Anthony Richardson is going to be in the NFL, given the inexperience. I mean, he was an inexperienced player coming into last season and then played 12 quarters. The jury is still out. But for fantasy purposes, he has really every tool in the box that you need to be the next great fantasy football quarterback.
Yeah, to your point, Field, last year, I was a little frustrated at times that Josh Allen led the league in turnovers, but still in leading the league in turnovers, guess what? He was like a top 3 quarterback.
He was the number one quarterback. He was the highest scoring player in all of fantasy football.
So this is one of those things, even if you have that situation, like you're still in a spot with Anthony Richardson, given his skill set, given the fact that he's got that goal line usage and the ability to run. I think I'm with you, Stephania. The only question is, have we talked about him so much, is the hype so much that you're going to have to take him ahead of some of the other guys that you've already seen it happen on the field?
Probably, because if people listen to us, they might be drafting him a little bit higher. I think initially when we started our mock draft project, I think you could get him in the 6th round, maybe, and then it started pushing up to even at one point late 3rd. And I know our colleague Mike Clay was very upset that he was going ahead of Lamar Jackson. He thought that was nonsense. But I think there's a real possibility that Anthony Richardson could end up in the top 3. I don't think that would be a surprise to any of us if that happens. So So you're still getting him at, I think, a reasonable rate. He's still in most drafts going behind Josh Allen, behind Jalen Hurts. And then it's sort of iffy if he goes 3, 4, 5, or 6 with CJ Stroud back there.
Somewhere in there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, Field Yates, you've got a quarterback as well that is your favorite this year.
Yeah, it's Dak Prescott and Anthony Richardson. Obviously, I would have been one of my picks as well. My stance there is well documented. Dak, you've heard my stance as well many times already so far this season, this preseason, I should say. But Dak, money in the bank for fantasy football purposes. Dak Prescott, one of the most prolific passing quarterbacks in the NFL with enough rushing upside. We got great news this week that CeeDee Lamb's contract was done as well, so you have no concerns about Dak not having his number one passing game option. And the reality is that he had that same cast of weapons last year for the most part. And what happened? He dominated. He was quarterback 3. So if you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, like, Dak doesn't have the same wideouts as insert other quarterback X, it's like, it doesn't matter. He doesn't need him, right? Yeah. So Dak has been so good. The ceiling is very high. He has been more prone to slower stretches than some of the other quarterbacks that are being drafted ahead of him. And that's the reason why Dak is now going, at least as of right now, in the 7th round. But a great value. And he just kind of is, to me, sort of like the metaphor for all the second-tier quarterbacks that are excellent values if you are not looking to spend big at quarterback with kind of that core 5 or 6 that I would categorize as Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. And then it's Anthony Richardson / CJ Stroud, kind of like 5, 6, sort of depending on how you want to draw the line there.
I'm with you on that. Our buddy Matt Bowen loved being able to grab Dak Prescott in our mock draft exercise, and he was one of the guys that he always adhered to this strategy. You can wait at the quarterback position and grab somebody like this because of how good he was last year. Stephania, when you look at this Cowboys team, like Field said, they're returning basically everybody from a weapons standpoint. I mean, there's no reason to not think that Dak can't repeat what he did last year, in spite of the fact he's coming off the board much later than a lot of these guys.
I think most notably for me is there's an evolution of the person, Dak Prescott, the athlete, because everybody's been talking about contracts in Dallas, and Dak is part of that conversation. And he came out with a quote the other day that said basically he's not listening to anything that Jerry Jones is saying to the media. Like, it's now like it's water rolling off his back. That shows me a confidence in the player and a comfort in his own skin as who he is as a player. That's what you want going into the season. You want that confidence that nothing is going to bother him. Nothing's going to disrupt him. And I think he carries that, and that leads that team.
Yeah.
I am going to say something that I might regret in 9 days.
Make sure we're recording. Are we recording?
I think the Dak deal gets done. I say this. I think you can put aside a lot of factors. And I think Dak wants to be the Dallas Cowboys quarterback. I think that Dak understands that he has... We're talking about unprecedented leverage.
Monumental leverage.
He plays this season.
Yes.
He would be the best quarterback on the free agent market by 1,000,000 times next year. The Cowboys have very, very serious concerns about being able to extend him beyond this season because of various things they have to deal with. Micah Parsons extension, the dead money involved for Dak. There's a lot of reasons to believe that Dak is going to win this negotiation in the court of public opinion. And it could probably benefit him to straighten things out. This is like, I haven't talked to Adam Schefter on this or anything. Like, my sixth sense is like maybe Dak just says, you know what, the grass ain't always greener. Like, being the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys means a ton to me. This is a guy who stands for all the right things. Recently, he's got a family. He's dropped his roots in Dallas even further. Like, I don't know, spider sense.
I like it. I hope that happens.
It because all of that, it bodes well for performance, and that bodes well for fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, my favorite quarterback this year, it hurts to be able to say this, but it's Jordan Love.
No, this is really noble by you to say.
I know.
I got to be honest, as a Lions fan, it's going to be tough here, but Jordan Love looked fantastic last season. Right now, ADP is 81.6 coming off in the 9th round, 9th quarterback off the board. But last year, in his first year as a starter, 5th in fantasy points, 2nd in passing touchdowns, 5th in pass attempts. He was top 5 in air yards per target, which helps when you have a guy named Christian Watson to help stretch the field out like that. He also had 247 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. He has all of his young pass catchers coming back. Do you know how old his oldest wide receiver is, Field Yates?
Probably
all
like 19.
young.
Yeah.
Basically, yes. Dontavian Wicks is 23. Jaden Reed is 24. Romeo Dobbs is 24. Christian Watson is 25. And Bo
Mike
Melton is
Clay
25.
loves this team
He loves the
so
Packers.
much. 'cause
And of course, they
they're so
cut
young.
Aaron Jones, who,
Right.
again, Mike thinks literally needs to be sent out to pasture, right? So,
But I think what that tells you, they're all growing together. And we
Exactly.
saw that development in the chemistry across the wide receiver core to the point where there's some debate about, remember, Christian Watson was by far the leader in the room and then had those hamstring injuries, which he has worked on in the offseason. But it's given the others a chance to rise to the point where you're like, any of them could strike any weekend. And that makes Jordan Love that much more valuable. as a
whenever
quarterback.
people ask me which Packers wide receiver should I be drafting this year and how soon, my answer is just draft Jordan
Just draft
Love.
one.
Because exactly what it means is that he's got just this ridiculous amount of weapons. And on top of the 4 receivers, they've got 2 tight ends who they think are going to be studs, and Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. So, not that I have either of those guys inside my top 10 tight ends. It's more to illustrate that, like, all of the talent surrounding Jordan Love suggests that a monster season that might be charged more by throwing the football as opposed to adding value with his legs, which he has some, but we're not talking about Lamar Jackson here,
correct.
right? That the real answer to which Packers receiver should I be drafting is maybe just draft Jordan Love instead.
I'm totally
Throw a
with
dart
you
on one
that.
of the 4 of them because there is value there. I mean, especially I know people are sick of saying this. I've got it tattooed on my back now. At cost. Right?
That's right. At cost. That's the whole thing. Grabbing this guy in the 9th round as the 9th quarterback, I think, is such unbelievable value. And it's just another reason, like you said with Dak Prescott, why you can wait at the quarterback position.
Snake Draft would say that
Snake
you're
Draft.
up
I'm going to
next,
start
Daniel.
it up. And
yeah.
listen, if I love Jordan Love, you already led me to it, Field. It's because I also enjoy some of those pass catchers. Jaden Reed is my guy at the wide receiver spot. It hurts really bad, actually, picking 2 Green Bay Packers. One was hard. Two was even tougher.
Test you right now?
But I do love Jaden Reed. You look at everything he did. 7 of his final 8 games, he had at least 15 fantasy points. He was wide receiver 10 over that stretch, averaging 17.4 fantasy points per game. Even when Christian Watson was healthy in their 9 games together. Jaden Reed, 101.8 fantasy points. Christian Watson, 101.3. A lot of this. Oh, by the way, he was also 3rd amongst running back and wide receivers in rushing yards. I mean,
he is a find the football type of player. Right?
He was like a mini Debo, like a not full Debo, like a little mini Debo.
I thought there was like a little bit of like I've used this analogy before, and don't think of this player in terms of how we view him at this moment. But remember Curtis Samuel's final season in Carolina. He was a monster in the second half of the season. He was incredible for fantasy. He ends up in Washington, and it was up and down, and we'll see in Buffalo. But that was what I saw in Jaden Reed at the end of last season.
And that's part of what I actually have that written down here. Like, one of the things we look for is rookies who come on strong in the second half of the season, right? Establishing that chemistry with their quarterback. Jaden Reed absolutely did that. I think even with Christian Watson and all these other pass catchers, I've said it a couple times on this program. I think that this is going to be like a mini 49ers offense where Jordan Love has so many different options to be able to go to. Jaden Reed, especially because of that low ADOT, it's going to be different than Christian Watson, but he should be heavily targeted and be a really nice safety blanket. So I'm all in on Jaden Reed this year. I have him as wide receiver 32, highest amongst all ESPN rankers.
Alrighty.
What about you, Field
So I'm
Yates?
up next. So again, these are kind of all over the board, right? Some of these players we're talking about with an
little higher,
ADP of
little lower.
99.5.
Yep.
And my pick is Marvin Harrison Jr., believe it or not, right? One of the players that I've been talking about along with Anthony Richardson all off season. Here is the reality about Marv. You're going to have to make a decision early in your drafts because if you're sitting in the middle of the order, you've got a chance of getting Marv at like current ADP, right? If you have the 5th pick, you do the math, that would get you to pick 25 in the 3rd round, right?
There you go.
However, if you're picking like 2nd, Marvin Harrison Jr., you're going to have to take him in a 10-team league in the 2nd round because he's not making it back to you at the end of the 3rd round. Or excuse me, at the beginning, like it's beginning of the 3rd round. It's possible he's gone by pick 22. So I'm all in on Marv. I don't think there's anything I need to add to this player. I'm a little bit wary of the idea of drafting a player close to his ceiling. But when you get this high in the rankings, almost all of these players are being drafted very close to their ceiling. I've talked about how there's nothing I'm more excited about to begin the season than watching Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels play. Not too far behind would be Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbor. Special talent, Stephania.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that I admire about Marvin Harrison Jr. was when he declined to do his workouts at the combine, it was because he was focused on a training schedule that would prepare him to start the season. I don't think people realize how many guys get hurt after they train for a combine, then they get hurt when they start doing football activity. To me, that was a smart business decision, and it reflects sort of the maturity and the forward thinking of a Marvin Harrison Jr. ready to play at the NFL level and produce immediately.
And your pick.
Stephania, you've also
My
got a wide
pick, I
receiver.
also have a rookie wide receiver on my list, and I went for the value play as well. Rome Odunze, who I think his story is great just in terms of how he made his way to Chicago. Caleb Williams, and he worked out, Caleb Williams called him up and had him come join them in the workouts in Southern California. So he had a chance to work out with Caleb and with Keenan Allen. And now Keenan Allen is helping not only mentor Caleb to the quarterback position, but mentor Rome Odunze to the wide receiver position.
What
so
a great mentor
a guy
for a young
who
wide
I
receiver.
think most people assumed with all this talent in the wide receiver room in Chicago, nothing's going to happen for Rome Odunze in the first year. I don't think that's true. And I think if you've seen, if you've watched any of the Hard Knocks and you've seen, he has some mistakes that he's making early, but he's also learning, and he's a little quieter in terms of how aggressively he wants to be good early, but he's working with a quarterback who has the same goals. And I think these two are clicking. I also spent time with Caleb Williams in the offseason, and he talked to me about what he saw in Rome Odunze and why he wanted him there in Chicago so badly. This is a chemistry I think we're going to see develop in the year, and where you can get him right now. What's his ADP? 110. So
wow.
Just think of where you're
12th
getting
round,
him,
yeah.
and potentially he could end up with wide receiver 2 value, I think.
He's my highest exposure player. I've still got a handful of drafts left, but currently he is my highest exposure player of all the redrafts that I have done this year, just because we talked yesterday about how, you're looking for players in the later rounds that can go nuclear. Now, does that mean they have a lower floor? Yes, it does. In the case of Rome Odunze, he might be buried behind those 2 receivers. But if he's got a couple of different pathways to becoming a fantasy superstar, an injury to DJ Moore, an injury to Keenan Allen, don't want to wish those things, obviously. Or Rome Odunze just being that darn good. This was the 6th rated player overall on my 2024 NFL draft board. The Bears got a very, very good player.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that it is a when does Rome Odunze take over as the wide receiver spot? Or do you think that there is still a possibility that he's the wide receiver 3 in this offense the
I think it's
entire
possible.
season?
Yeah, Keenan Allen, listen, I know it's become a little in vogue this summer to be Keenan Allen getting close to the end. Maybe that's true. The guy was awesome.
Keenan Allen is one of the best route runners in the league, and that's where Rome Odunze is learning. And I think that is why he's going to be so good for back half of the season for sure.
Yeah, great mentor for him being able to be there in Chicago. All right, that's our quarterbacks and wide receivers. And when we come back here on Fantasy Focus Football, we're going to be talking about our favorite running backs in 2024. Stick around. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp, Fields Yates,
Fields
just breaking his
breaking
microphone
equipment
and
in the
Stephania
studio.
Bell. Usually we only break the microphones in the news studio, not in this one.
I thought he
Field.
only broke his shoulder, but
Yeah, what's up with that? All right. So we've been starting with Stephania and I. How about we start with you? I'm going to give you some flowers. So you
I was going to say I know how snake drafts work, so it's my turn. But I'm good.
You're good with doing this because he should be able to
Shake
start
it up.
sooner or later. Yeah,
Shake it up.
Fields, your favorite running back in fantasy football this year?
Yeah, so actually all of us are, I guess, no, I was going to say all of us are taking non-top 25 guys, but there's one in there, which is totally understandable.
Very fair. I would have probably drafted that person if somebody else.
Yes. And it's good to hit different tiers of players as well. But Javonte Williams, I've mentioned him a lot recently. And this was one where it was I really didn't have super strong feelings about Javonte Williams until I realized how incongruent my ranking was with his ADP. I have him ranked as running back 23. His ADP is closer to RB 29 or RB 30,
Wow.
which is a bigger gap. So it wasn't like I had him as RB 23 and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this is undervalued. It's that I think ADP and the masses have undervalued Javonte Williams. When you're taking these running backs outside the top 20, I am looking for players that I think have the most likely path not to a top 5 season, because I don't think there's that many guys outside the top 20 that have a legitimate top 5 season in them. I'm looking for players that I think have the most likely path to a top 15 season,
right?
Which is solid, not spectacular. So you think about guys like Zamir White or James Conner or Javonte Williams. That's the territory that we are talking about in this conversation. I think Javonte is being disrespected and not mentioned in that same breadth of players because RB 29 and 30, you're talking about guys like Jalen Warren, who's a good player, obviously. Tajay Spears, but those guys are clearly at best like 1A with their counterpart in the backfield. So Javonte, I do believe, will lead the Broncos backfield in touches once again this season. It was a high volume season last year, 15th in the NFL in touches. And while we know that it's a really tough thing for beat reporters to accurately assess exactly how backfields are going to shake out or how many targets each wide receiver is going to get, I think we all can agree that the reports in Denver seem to indicate that Javonte's probably going to be the lead back.
Yep.
Yeah,
Probably.
seems that way.
I don't want to, not holding these reporters to it because they're not the ones calling the plays. That's the responsibility of Sean Payton. But some excellent reporters with their eyes on the ground seem to think that Javonte is the lead guy right now.
Feels like there's a little trepidation from drafters because when you saw him last year coming back from that injury, Stephania, he didn't come back to his full rookie self. But this is part of what some of the stuff we talk about this all the time on the show.
I feel
right?
like a broken record, so I think sometimes I'm like, oh, am I going to say this again? Because it's the umpteenth time I've said it. But that first year coming back from a major knee reconstructive surgery, and his was not just an isolated ACL tear, it was a multi-ligament knee injury, a very, very difficult one. If you want to go back and look at the injury he suffered, you can tell just how bad it was. And not only did he get hurt, but then somebody fell on him right after he took the injury. And so him making it back and playing the entire season was remarkable to me. Just the fact that he was able to get out there. But sometimes you wish the players had an additional few months because you feel like if they could have re-entered the football season at the point where they were a little closer to what they were pre-injury, people would feel differently about them. And I think that's where we are with Javonte Williams. Part of last season was him getting back to himself. And imagine if he comes out of the gate strong, and then Fields going to look so smart here because people who are reluctant to draft him because they're hanging on the last thing they saw are going to miss out on a player who might be entirely different when he starts this year.
All right, so Stephania, you've also got a running back that I wanted to talk about, but you took him as well. So let's talk about Derrick freaking Henry.
Sniped, just like in a draft.
That's right, just like in a draft. Yeah.
Yeah, Derrick Henry. I love Derrick Henry this season. I just love him in his new location with the Ravens, and I bet he loves it too because the opportunity for Derrick Henry to find the end zone, I think, is terrific. He is going to be, the backfield is going to be Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, right? These are the running backs you have to worry about, presenting totally different types of threats. But that's what's going to give Derrick Henry the opportunity he never had when he was alone in Tennessee. I mean, all eyes were on him. Now, everybody has to be accounted for. He's got a better front line. I think in that red zone, Derrick Henry's going to be just a barrel and totally dangerous. And by the way, if any, I feel like we got to shout out Mike Clay. With the age thing, even Mike Clay with the age thing acknowledges that Derrick Henry, he thinks, will still have a strong season. But do you know that Derrick Henry has played at least 15 games every year of his career, except for the 1 year where he had the foot injury?
Yep.
So even since coming back from that, which he was able to get back that year, he has played in more than 15 games. This guy is tough as nails, and a rejuvenated Derrick Henry is one you love to see.
He's had double-digit touchdowns in 6 straight seasons.
Which includes that season in which he missed half of it.
Exactly. Yes, which is unreal. And if Gus Edwards, I've been saying this all offseason, if Gus Edwards, and this is not a shot at Gus Edwards, can score 13 touchdowns in the Ravens offense, then Derrick Henry, I feel like legitimately could hit 20. I mean, this could be a guy that you could get to. Lamar Jackson does not steal goal line touches like the Josh Allen's and the Jalen Hurts does. So I'm totally with you on Derrick Henry. The only thing I would love to see would be a little bit more passing game work. We kind of started to see a little bit of that, but
I don't know if you're going to need it. Yeah. And the other thing I'll say is just in terms of where you can get him in fantasy, we all know the top 3 running backs that we've talked about who are in the most elite tier, but in that next grouping, Derrick Henry's my favorite.
Yeah, Derrick
Henry,
Henry,
like the Isaiah Pacheco,
right.
Travis Etienne category. You lean towards there.
Yep.
Yeah, which it's like the 2 others are excellent, and you can make a credible case for any of them. But it just is weird. You're on the clock, and you're like, Derrick Henry is sitting there. Like that's hard to bypass.
Feels pretty good. That feels pretty good.
His ADP has climbed this offseason.
Only question I have real fast, Stephania. Keaton Mitchell is out. Not going to be there. Who else is behind him? Justice Hill, it feels like.
Justice Hill is the only one that's on my radar as somebody who could spot him. But
You literally can't see Justice Hill behind Derrick Henry. Because Derrick is massive and Justice is
I don't think we're really thinking about that. Yeah. It's going to be the Derrick Henry show. That's another thing, actually, which
he'll have the entire workload. Yep.
By the way, 2 things. Like witnesses have confirmed that Justice Hill is in the running back group. I just haven't seen it with my own eyes. And a plug. The great Eric Carabell has his column out today. It's called the Don't Be Surprised If column.
That's right.
And it's some bold predictions, including Daniel Dopp's idea of Derrick Henry having a massive season. Don't be surprised if Derrick Henry has 20 rushing touchdowns.
I'm with you on that.
Go check out Eric's work, as always, on ESPN. Hello, Eric. We miss you.
Love that guy. Fantastic. All right. My favorite running back, David Montgomery.
I thought you were going to say Josh Jacobs. I was noticing a trend.
Stop it.
Monty.
We've hardly talked about David Montgomery this offseason, to be honest. I mean, this is one of those things. I think he is a really great RB2 given the value of his 8th round price tag coming off the board as the 22nd running back. Over 1,100 scrimmage yards last year, 13 touchdowns. That was 4th amongst running backs. 17 carries inside the 5-yard line. That was 5th most in the NFL. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry. That was 8th amongst running backs. For what it's worth, Jahmyr Gibbs was 3rd. That just showcases how good this Detroit Lions offensive line is. He was top 12 in yards after first contact. I mean, there are so many things to love, I think, about David Montgomery if you decide to grab him as your RB2. He is in a spot where double-digit touchdowns is absolutely not out of the question. The Lions have supported 2 top 20 running backs for 2 consecutive seasons with how much they run the football. And I don't think anything is going to change here. That offensive line looks almost exactly the same. They replaced one guy, a Pro Bowler. We signed Kevin Zeitler from the Baltimore Ravens. So I don't feel any trepidation about David Montgomery. Not only that, if there was somebody that you said, all right, I'm going to draft this guy, between running back 17 and running back 25. I don't know if there's anyone that has the potential upside of David Montgomery, because if anything happens to Jahmyr Gibbs, he immediately vaults into a top 10 running back for us on a weekly basis.
I was just going to say that, and not, just a little note that, Jahmyr Gibbs has had a hamstring issue in the preseason, which I don't think the Lions are worried about in terms of him starting, but we do know anybody who's had a hamstring injury, you're kind of watching that it bubbles up potentially again during the season. There's David Montgomery ready to step in.
Yeah, I think the big question with Monty is just how sticky you think the touchdowns are. And you could probably argue that if there is a running back that you can count on great goal line opportunities and the chance for 10 more rushing touchdowns, it would be David Montgomery, because he is a minimal factor in the passing game. Yes. He had just 16 catches last season on 24 targets. Those targets are likely to go to Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yep.
But given what you just mentioned, like that you're getting a player who has standalone value, but also is an insurance running back.
Yes.
Not too many of those exist in the entire NFL, at least in 2024. So, Monty, an easy player to understand why there is plenty of value.
Where's your touchdown line? How many do you think he gets this year?
I think the Mike Clammy would be like, you got to set it at like 8.5.
Yeah.
All right.
I was going to go 8.
8?
A good number.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I'll take 8.5 rushing touchdowns.
Take the over-under.
That's right. All right.
Which one? Over-under?
I would go over. I think he's going to be at 10.
Okay.
Maybe we do a poor bet later on this season.
Great.
We'll find out. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about our favorite tight ends in 2024. Stick around. Back here on Fantasy Focus Football, Daniel Dopp, Field Yates, Stephania Bell, and who do you want to start this one?
I say you, because you haven't start yet. Yeah.
All right, I feel bad about that. Well, I started with Jaden Reed, but we can do this again. I've been talking about this guy a bunch, guys. Dalton Kincaid. I love
Dalton Kincaid.
Love
nice
Dalton
pick.
Kincaid as one of my tight ends. Kincaid saw 94 targets last year, including 6 or more targets in 9 of his final 11 games. In those 9 games, he averaged 13.3 fantasy points. That would have been tight end 6 at the end of the season. Now both, we said it yesterday, Stephon Diggs and also Gabe Davis, but 240 targets have been vacated from that team. There are question marks everywhere, honestly, in this offense. Like, that's the thing. Samuel and Coleman are both new to this offense. Curtis Samuel's best season was 851 receiving yards. He only has 7 games with 20 or more fantasy points in his 7-year career.
Curtis Samuel. I think like all of them came during the stretch of one season. It was crazy.
He had, and that's it. Like I, it's not that I'm out on Curtis Samuel. It's just that, like, we haven't seen him be a wide receiver one. Keon Coleman as a rookie, we have reasons to believe it's going to take a little bit for him to be able to get used to this offense in the NFL game. And then there's so much hype on Khalil Shakir, but it's more hype than production.
Is it me hyping him too much? Because ADP tells you there's not nearly enough hype, in my opinion. He's going undrafted, so.
Is he seriously?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a mistake. Khalil Shakir, I think, should at least be drafted. Only 46 targets last season, but I think that when you look at this, Dalton Kincaid should lead this team in targets. I think he's going to push for 100 receptions this season. At the tight end spot with where you're able to grab him, 7th tight end off the board in the 7th round. Love me some Dalton Kincaid this year.
Yeah, that we've said this so many times. The quarterback and the tight end approach mirrors this year, right? Because while I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh my God, you took Mark Andrews, how dare you?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I could also tell you that you could get Mark Andrews light or maybe even Mark Andrews equal.
Yep.
4 rounds later or 3 rounds later in a guy like Dalton Kincaid.
I feel like that's where we all landed with these tight end picks too, is that we're looking, we know the Travis Kelce, the Sam Laporta, the Mark Andrews. And then it seems like there's guys who are going unrecognized just below that who could
100%.
provide at least close to, if not comparable, production.
You're not going to lose your fantasy league if you draft one of those early tight ends. Like they're still going to be awesome this year, but you just don't. We don't think you need to use an early round pick on him. And Stephania, you got another tight end that you can grab in the middle rounds that we love.
I am Evan Engram, and I've sort of came around on this one because I was one of the people ignoring him in the mock drafts and failing to recognize just how valuable he is in that Jacksonville offense. 143 targets last year. I mean, Trevor Lawrence definitely looking his way. There's a bond there. And I was looking back to see when was his most productive in terms of receiving yards. And last year, I mean, he almost hit 1,000 yards receiving. That's a ton for a tight end. So I really like Evan Engram. He's also been fairly durable after his early years in the league. He's played consistently, I think all 17 games last year as well. You like to see that because obviously tight end, a very physical position. I mean, these guys are, to me, they're like just behind the running back in terms of their exposure to injury because of the physical nature of their position, both when, on ball and off. So I just like Evan Engram for the value that you can get him. He is ranked as our tight end 6, his average ADP going around 61. So, if you want to wait on tight end, but still be in the tier where we're saying, this is a tight end that you want on your roster. You don't want to go beyond this group. Evan Engram is one.
You said 143 targets. That's first among tight ends. Field, where did it rank just in the entire NFL? Do you remember?
I'm going to go with 13th.
I'm pretty sure he was 4th in the NFL.
There were 10 guys who had 150.
What?
10, but that includes receivers.
We're going to look it up. Let me look it up. We're going to see this. All right.
Check the over number. Evan Engram is the PPR king, by the way. His value, I know
the volume stuff.
Sorry,
right?
not targets. I meant receptions.
Receptions,
16 receptions.
Yes, second most by tight end ever in a single season. Zach Ertz once had 117. So we focus the majority of our content on PPR formats.
Yep.
If you play non-PPR, I would not say ignore what we're talking about here, but becomes a decidedly less valuable player, which is the case for most tight ends, to be fair.
4th in the NFL in receptions amongst wide receivers and tight ends.
Flip side of that is I find myself in a lot of leagues where there are tight end bonuses for receptions. And that's where somebody like Evan Engram
He's like
really
a cheat code
shines,
in that
right?
perspective. Yeah, he's going to be awesome in this offense again.
Yep.
Field, who do you got? Where are you going at the tight end position?
I'm going with David Njoku, who we talked
love
about
late round tight ends
we
here.
have. Yeah, the
Canes.
theme, again, there's... Say again. Go Canes, that's right. Go Canes. Njoku was awesome last season, was such a factor with multiple quarterbacks. The Browns did invest more in the receiving room this offseason with the trade of Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, if you know me, you know I'm not totally certain what Jerry Jeudy is as a player, but this guy just keeps falling and falling and falling in drafts. We were talking about our mock draft recap yesterday, Stephania, on the show. He went 112th, and this is just one mock draft. It's not like every draft goes this way, but Jake Ferguson, who I think you could argue is less valuable going into the season than David Njoku, went 78th. So I went 34 spots.
That's surprising.
I don't exactly know why there isn't a little bit more appreciation for David Njoku. He's a good player in I hope a functioning offense this year.
Maybe that's the question. Exactly. I think you just answered the
exactly
question.
Full tilt last year either. Like Joe Flacco obviously had that run there, but like after week 5 of last season, Njoku became a very consistent player with multiple quarterbacks. So I'm more optimistic than it would appear the masses are on David Njoku. And shout out to, I did a draft last night with my wife and some of our friends. Actually, before I say that, shout out my wife Chapin. It's her birthday today. She turns 23.
What? How did we bury the lead? Happy
23.
birthday, Chapin.
We can't sing to you, sweetie, because I think it's illegal. But I love you, and the girls are so incredibly lucky to have you as their mom.
We know he loves
absolutely.
you. I learned that in the Bahamas.
The hospital. That was one of the things I was telling the doctor when I was
She's great.
laughing gas. But yes, it was interesting to hear some of the names being pronounced in a draft that we were on.
That's great.
And Njoku, safe to say, gave some people some struggles. Carlos, Njoku.
Yes. How do you say it? Give it a shot.
Now I'm gonna screw up. David Njoku.
There you go.
Yeah.
David Njoku, for what it's worth, had 81 receptions last year. Amari Cooper, for what the number one wide receiver for this team, had 72 receptions. So
you like more receptions, right?
I like
this
more
is not like golf
receptions.
scoring. You
Nope.
prefer, in the only time that 72 is better than 81 is in golf. Not that I would know that unless you're talking about 9-hole scoring.
Right, I
But
was gonna say, who are you golfing with?
basically, they were 25 fantasy points apart at the end of
it's
the year.
crazy. Yeah.
And-
Now, Amari Cooper missed games the last 3 games of the season, but he also had that 51.1 point explosion. Did Amari? So
That's right.
I just think Njoku is underappreciated, as are all of these tight ends.
There we go.
Last night I was in a draft where I missed on the tight end run. I saw people were double dipping. It's a 12-team league, and so I was having this debate last night. Who is your favorite non-type top 10 tight end? Hard to find a definitive answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dalton Schultz.
Schultz.
You can make the case for Brock Bowers, Pat Freiermuth, but pickings are slim after the first 10.
You don't love it.
Agree. Don't miss out on the top.
I was going to say, this is one of those where there's like a very definitive line at the tight end spot we want to
Going into the season, people. Going into.
That's right. That's right. All right. When we come back, we're going to recap our fantasy favorites for 2024. We'll see you on the other side. Back here on Fantasy Focus Football, Daniel Dopp, Field Yates, and Stephania Bell. Guys, we just went through our favorite players at each position. Stephania, if we were going to say very quickly who's your favorite kicker, just to make sure that everyone understands who it is, let's just get it out there again.
Brandon Aubrey.
Brandon Aubrey. All right.
Go check out his story. I mean, never played professional football until he was never played NFL football until he signed with the Cowboys. Didn't play football in college. Was a professional soccer player. He's got a boot. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. My favorite kicker.
Made a 66-yarder in the preseason. I'm just saying.
Did.
My favorite kicker is Jake Bates, who has also kicked some very long field goals before in his life, especially in the UFL. If you watched the show yesterday, you saw that field. You teased a defense really quickly. We're going to go back and look at all the 4 players that we just talked about, but who's the defense you were teasing?
Just a reminder. So
In week one,
but also week 1, we got the Chiefs playing the Ravens. Do you want that defense?
Nope.
Not so much. You have the Ravens playing the Chiefs. You don't want that one,
Nope.
right? You got the 49ers playing the Jets and the Jets playing the 49ers.
Like either one of
don't
those.
like
I
either of
I
those.
feel fine about the 49ers in that case. And I do feel sort of fine about the Jets because of the 49ers offensive line concerns right now. But still, like, ideally, you're not starting your defense against the elite offenses. Eagles play the Packers. Packers play the Eagles. Bengals play the Patriots.
Ooh.
Oh, hi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, and it's going to be more difficult to just always stream the team that plays against like the Patriots or the Panthers or the Commanders, perhaps. But I am much more willing to stream this year based off the fact that some of the highest ranked defenses, Browns, they get the Cowboys in week 1. Cowboys get the Browns in week 1, which the Cowboys might be okay there because I do have some question marks about Cleveland's offense in general, and their offensive tackles have been very unhealthy this preseason. Jedrick Will is still not a factor. I think Jack Conklin will be fine. But anyways, we're diving way deeper into defense than we normally do. But my big point is that streaming could be the way this season.
Especially in week 1, you do not need to grab that premier defense that you think is going to be great because you might know you want to play in week 1.
Well, it's just tough if you pay a 4-round premium on your defense and then week 1 you're like, wait, am I actually going to play the Ravens against the Chiefs? Like,
Don't
you
wanna
want
do
to
that.
tempt fate with Patrick Mahomes? Be my guest.
All right, so just a quick recap of this. My favorite players for 2024, Jordan Love, Jaden Reed. If you love the quarterback or you love the wide receiver, you're probably going to like one of the other positions as well. So I love both of those guys there. Also love me some David Montgomery at the running back spot coming off the board super late. And Dalton Kincaid, all of these guys you're getting after the 7th round of your draft. It's just value. That's part of why I love these guys, that you can get so deep, and I think they're really good value there.
Love
Stephania.
that you got a lion in there.
You had to.
You had to balance it out with 2
Packers in
Packers.
there.
I mean,
Yeah.
you had to make it right.
I was gonna say, I think we had a company-wide email that went out a couple of days ago when Jimmy Pitara was updating the bylaws.
Yes.
And I think he did mention something about like Daniel must talk about one line.
Obligatory.
Exactly. I'm with
So
you on
that's
that.
actually not the case. I'm sure there have been company-wide emails in recent days, but we do not get one from Jimmy that like updates the bylaws. Like, just to be clear.
Just so that people know. Well, I my fantasy faves for the purpose of this exercise, and I'm sorry Christian McCaffrey didn't make it as my running back because, of course. But I love my picks here. Anthony Richardson is quarterback. We've been talking about him all through the preseason. Rome Odunze, I think, kind of climbing up, should be climbing up fantasy boards because I think he has an opportunity to really make himself potential wide receiver 2 in that offense. Derrick Henry gets a fresh start with the Ravens, and he's just going to bulldoze his way into the end zone. And Evan Engram, a value pick with his volume work as tight end.
So great. Field, give us your 4 one more time.
Yeah, one more time. Dak Prescott is my quarterback. We talked about him extensively earlier today and really throughout this preseason. Marvin Harrison Jr., probably the player that has the most elite, draft-altering upside here. Marvin Harrison Jr. checks all the boxes. And then Javonte Williams. This is my I'm in like with this player, Javonte Williams. And then David Njoku, the Chief, who we just talked about, who, again, part of that group of tight ends that can just be so valuable in that second tier as opposed to paying a more expensive freight on some of the top-ranked tight ends this season.
Hopefully some of those names can help you heading into the heaviest draft weekend of the year.
How many you got?
I got 4 drafts coming up this weekend.
I don't even know.
Yeah, I know.
My calendar needs to be more defined than it is. I feel bad. I'm going to have to tell Rosie.
And it's not even just the weekend for us because it wraps into next week. I feel like I have drafts every single day.
On Tuesday
right, leading up to.
3 on
That's
Tuesday.
right. We have our show league, our Sunday show, and our Focus League drafts.
That's right. Yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you're drafting this weekend, make sure you have a ton of fun. If you drink adult beverages, also drink a lot of water with it just to be safe. You don't want to be that person that makes very bad picks.
I want to pull a hamstring on your way to the draft board.
Make sure you are doing that as well. We love you. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. And don't ever forget, Fantasy Focus Football is presented by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. We love you guys. We will see you next week.
Never forget that part.